everybody, Brady here from BGWX, and this will technically not be a weather-related video, but it will be a natural disaster-related video in terms of the ongoing earthquake and tsunami that's happening. There's just a lot of, I think, discourse that's being slanted a little bit. I think it's being misleading in some of the information, I didn't think I would see a tsunami bust post, but I just want to address stuff for people that are genuinely curious about, genuinely curious about, how this process works. What goes on to create this. What's actually happening. Again, just to be clear, I'm not a tsunami expert, but I have taken several geology courses before, including. I guess I would say at the collegiate level. This is the best way to phrase it. That included a lab as well, so that was lots of fun. I didn't enjoy it as much as meteorology, but some of this information, along with me just also doing a lot of self-taught, I guess you could say, tsunami stuff in terms of not really trying to learn, just like genuinely curious about how this works, because it's fascinating. To me, I've seen plenty of tsunami videos before, gone down that rabbit hole, and then curiosity spikes, and I'm sure like you're wondering now, how does this happen? How does this work? So this is where it kind of comes from, in terms of my knowledge and how it works, and then kind of it just kind of connects. So I have a basic understanding of how it works. I'm not an expert, but I figured. That's many of you are not looking for an expert analysis. Many of you are just looking for a simple analysis. So without further ado, let's get into it. So here's a good diagram. I thought that, I recorded a video originally, did not save. I guess you can't screen record, talk over a video on YouTube that's playing. So we're just going to have to go with this. So how it works is, right, that initial earthquake happens, right, and the fault lines move, right. Oftentimes, it's not. Oftentimes, it's not as much as you think. It can be just 30, 40, 50, in a bigger case like 60, 70 feet. We see those fault lines move. It doesn't take a lot. 10, 20 feet moving of the fault lines, it can make a huge difference. And as you can see here, what happens is, right, these fault lines, right, we see this, boom, right here. Fault moves over, right, is what we see, right, the tectonic plates here, we see it, boom, move here, and this causes, when we see that earthquake happen, right, along the fault line, what happens is the water gets displaced up all around. So imagine this is all deep ocean. This is not to scale well at all. This is very much it's not a good job of being to scale. But the water displaces all around. Imagine this all deep ocean here, everywhere. And it gets sent out in all directions. All of this energy that just got, boom, of this dispersion of water that just got created due to the earthquake happening. Obviously underwater, where the tectonic plates are, where the fault line is. And so now in this process, what we're seeing is it gets brought up, right? But it can't just keep going up, right? Gravity says what goes up must come down. So, right, so it kind of has to get held down. And what happens is we see these waves ripple out, all effect, they propagate out. And so the water gets sent literally in all directions, I feel like I'm drawing a hurricane again for some reason, but it gets sent out in all directions. And it's not necessarily just one massive wave. Oftentimes, it comes out, and you can see the energy coming out of the earthquake, the water being displaced. It is not oftentimes it's almost never actually just one wave that just comes out in both directions, and that's it. Massive, 150 foot wall of water. That's not how it works. It is a large series of oftentimes waves that come through, and it's one after another, and they kind of, as they get closer to the shoreline, oftentimes there's different things, right? So let's say even before, close to the shoreline, let's say, by the time, thousands of miles before it gets here. For example, there's different, in terms of the way they separate out, there's so many different things that can happen. The waves sometimes can cancel each other out depending on the sea floor, how the specific dispersion of energy happened, right? There's so many, I would have to really, you'd have to really go into more of an expert analysis to go into all of those little details. But right, just imagine there's so many different levels of detail that can happen in terms of before all this water energy gets sent to the coastline. So especially the farther you get away, oftentimes the smaller the wave is going to be originally from where the quake just happened. But that doesn't mean you can still be thousands and thousands of miles away and see large tsunami impacts, significant, very large, devastating tsunami impacts. I think Thailand is a good example of that in the Indian Ocean. Just a good distance away from in that 2004 earthquake, but still devastating impacts. Obviously, but as again it gets closer, then again the shoreline and the exact specifics have a massive impact as well. But as it gets closer, waves start to slow down. Again, imagine this water all coming out 500-600 plus miles per hour sometimes. And as it gets closer, though, it starts to slow down, and the waves start to gain height as well. These waves start to gain height as they get closer to the shoreline. And oftentimes what we see then, they start coming one after another, and they start coming close to the shoreline. I think a great example of that is in this video right here. What happened? This Japan video right here. I think this is a great example of that. Take a look here. All these different, you can see all these ripples wave. It's not just one massive tidal wave that comes through. Look at all these different waves coming in. This is so much water energy coming in all at once. And oftentimes, the water can then recede again after this. And then you'll see more come in, right? It's miles and miles, a stretch of water energy, so to say, coming in. And so it is oftentimes just, it is a more significant process than it gets. I was showing the Japan tsunami, for example, which obviously we've seen more significant impacts from this Japan one, at least so far, recorded. But you can see here, it's not just one massive. I hope this was still recording. It's not just one massive wave coming in, so to say. It's all. Look at all those different waves coming in. And coming in very fast, very significant in terms of the damage that can be done. But remember, let's go to back to our Hawaii example. That's happening right now, so to say, because Hawaii's U.S. notable. What happens is all these different waves can come on in. There can be many waves. There can be many different times, like 7, 8, 9, 10. There can be a dozen plus, so sometimes more waves that come on in. So now all of this energy is instead of, let's say, 3 to 5 waves, it's coming in spread out in, let's say, all these different waves, it's coming in spread out over miles and miles of a stretch. So instead of, let's say, 3 waves of, 20 feet, let's say, for example, now they're coming in, let's say, that 60 feet of, it's not exactly how it works, but now let's say all of that water energy of 60 feet is coming in, let's say, in, 10 waves. I don't know, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Let's say all that, that's how that water energy is coming. Did I 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? I don't know. Am I just not a good counter? That's 9. There's 10. Let's say it's spread out through there. So now all these waves, let's say on average, are now, the 60 feet of water is now 6 feet height in each one. So, and depending on the exact, coastline and the specifics of that, maybe there's a little bit of elevation at some of these coastlines. Again, maybe some of the way that, the islands are shaped around. Let's say there's a little curvature here into the island. Now all of this water is going to be able to rush in at a different angle, and that may help support higher waves, at certain locations. So again, that was a 2D demonstration, not a 3D. So all these different things can play a factor. So I want people to understand it's not a perfect science still as well. There's so much more studies that need to be done on the wave dispersion that happens after how they separate from the initial earthquake and from the initial disruption in the seafloor. There's so much more studies that need to be done, just like stuff in meteorology as well. So I don't want people to understand it's not a perfect science still in terms of what needs to be studied with this. But I want you to get that idea that tsunamis don't really necessarily like bust, so to say. I think people get an idea of certain impacts of what to expect, and they get this built up idea in their head. And sometimes the relation, how that information is relayed, is also maybe not well. Like if we're saying, get ready, this is it, in 22 minutes or whatever, your life is going to be threatened. You just all you have to say is, listen, as tsunami is coming, get to higher ground, avoid this for your best interest of safety. I think that's pretty clear. Because I think the idea of a tsunami coming to any random person, they'll want to get out of the way. I don't think you have to say this is going to kill you. For most people, at least. Some people, you're just not going to be able to change their thoughts. It's the same stuff kind of with storm surge sometimes and trying to get people to evacuate. But it's obviously the time and you have to prepare is a lot different. But I'm just saying, this is kind of a basic idea of how tsunamis work. I may have left out a couple things I wanted to discuss, but here's a general idea of how it works, right? This is how tsunami works. I guess Tsunami Genesis is that's the title of this video, maybe we'll call it. But, this is just an idea, right? Earthquake, water displaced, all directions around, and it's not coming in one tidal wave. It's many waves that the water comes in, and depending on, how many waves, how many total, how strong, how well put together. There's constructive and destructive waves, I think it is, in terms of, how well put together the waves are, I guess is how I would phrase it. Again, that's a little bit farther out of my expertise, so I don't want to go too far into and act like, I'm an expert on something I'm not, but it's just a general idea of how tsunamis works. Hopefully this was helpful. Again, we will, I know we have been posting a lot, very busy, but I told you guys severe weather would be a little bit less quiet, maybe a little bit less than I wanted to, but still, I told you guys it would be a little bit quieter. The tropics, as they start heating up into August and September, I promise there will be more. We're not going to be missing out on, impactful hurricanes. I promise, especially with U.S. Or just really any impacts to land. We typically won't be missing out on that as we get closer to more peak hurricane season stuff. So I think that's going to do it for me. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Hopefully this helped, and I will see you all until next time.